Across Latin America, the shockwaves spread faster than sound. Colombia's military quietly confirmed U.S. flights near its border. Brazil called for restraint but raised surveillance over its northern airspace. Cuba denounced the move as imperialist theater, while the Dominican Republic offered refueling access, proof that even neutral nations were taking sides. Beyond the region, analysts in Beijing and Moscow took note. Russian state media framed the mission as proof that Washington still sees Latin America as its backyard. In China, foreign policy commentators linked the B-52s to the U.S. bomber patrols over the South China Sea, a global pattern of projection. Meanwhile, European intelligence reports hinted the deployment wasn't random. It was part of a broader contingency plan for regional instability, possibly tied to Venezuela's collapsing oil infrastructure. Every circle those bombers made told allies and adversaries the same thing. America was back in the Caribbean, and the skies no longer belonged to chance. They belonged to intent. When the bombers finally turned north, fading into the haze above the Atlantic, the silence they left behind was deafening. The mission was over, but the message was permanent. In less than 24 hours, America had reminded an entire region that it could appear, threaten, and vanish without warning. Venezuela called it provocation. Washington called it deterrence. The truth was somewhere in between, a silent negotiation written in altitude and intent. Across the Caribbean, fishermen, pilots, and soldiers had watched those silver giants carve arcs across the sky, a reminder that power doesn't always announce itself. It arrives, lingers, and leaves a shadow behind. The B-52s didn't drop a single bomb, but they didn't have to. Their flight alone shifted the psychological balance of the hemisphere. For now, the skies are quiet again. But every time radar screens flicker along the coast, one question echoes from Caracas to Washington. Was this a warning, or the rehearsal for something far greater? Long before the public noticed anything unusual on radar, the mission already had a name: Operation Caribbean Watch. Planned quietly inside U.S. Strategic Command, it began as a contingency drill on paper. In practice, it was a stress test of readiness. Satellite imagery showed fuel convoys and munitions trucks lining up at Barksdale Air Force Base weeks earlier. Crews trained for low-visibility flights across the Gulf, where tropical storms offered perfect cover. When the order came, 3 B-52s lifted off in sequence, each refueled midair over the Yucatan before dropping to lower altitude near Venezuelan airspace. Transponders went dark. Even Allied radar stations weren't briefed on their timing. To outside observers, they appeared suddenly, 3 metallic ghosts gliding over turquoise waters. Intelligence insiders later claimed the deployment wasn't about Venezuela alone, but about testing response times from Russia's allies in the region. If that's true, then the message wasn't local at all. It was global, and the Caribbean was just the stage. The world didn't stay silent for long. Within hours of the bombers' return, reactions rippled from one capital to another. Moscow condemned the move as strategic intimidation, calling it a violation of regional peace. Beijing's foreign ministry warned that power projection in the Western Hemisphere invites instability. In Europe, NATO allies walked a careful line, supporting Washington's right to operate in international airspace but urging restraint. Meanwhile, Latin America's streets filled with debate. Some called it protection, others, provocation. Venezuelan state media aired footage of the bombers alongside images of past U.S. interventions, fueling nationalism and fear. In Washington, defense officials dismissed the outrage as predictable, but privately, analysts knew the truth. Every show of force sparks another. Satellites caught Russian surveillance aircraft entering the Caribbean days later, circling in reply. The skies had become a conversation of power, each flight a sentence in a language only nations understand. And somewhere between them, peace hung by a thread. While the world focused on the bombers' contrails, the real battle was unfolding in the shadows. Inside data streams, satellites, and encrypted transmissions. As the B-52s patrolled the Caribbean, U.S. intelligence aircraft flew higher and farther, mapping every Venezuelan radar pulse and communication signal. Electronic warfare planes from Puerto Rico and Florida scanned frequencies, building a digital portrait of Venezuela's air defense network. Every radar lock, every missile battery ping, every command relay was logged and analyzed. It wasn't just a show of strength, it was reconnaissance disguised as deterrence. At the same time, cyber teams in Texas and Virginia monitored Venezuela's command networks for unusual activity, ensuring that any retaliatory order could be traced in real time. Inside the Pentagon, analysts cross-referenced the data with satellite imagery from the same night, confirming troop movements near key bases in Maracay and Barcelona. To the public, the mission looked like muscle flexing. To insiders, it was a silent probe, a test of response, timing, and technology. The B-52s may have left the skies, but their sensors, cameras, and listening devices left with a treasure trove of information. In modern warfare, intelligence is the first strike, and this time, it was delivered without a single shot fired. Across the turquoise skies of the Caribbean, the silence shattered. Locals on radar tracking apps watched in disbelief as massive US B-52 Stratofortress bombers appeared, ghosts on screens, call signs blinking, Bunny 01, Bunny 02, Bunny 03. They weren't supposed to be there. Flying low and wide over international waters, the bombers traced slow, deliberate loops near Venezuela's northern coast, just outside its air defense zone. To Washington, it was routine training. To Caracas, it looked like a countdown. The B-52 is no ordinary aircraft. It's an airborne symbol of destruction, a relic of the Cold War that still terrifies anyone who sees its silhouette on radar. The message was clear. The US wasn't just watching. It was reminding the region what real power looks like. Within hours, Venezuelan command centers went on high alert. Fighter jets scrambled. Civilian pilots were warned to stay grounded. And while officials called it a precaution, the truth was obvious. Something big was unfolding above the Caribbean, and Venezuela had no idea how far it would go. The B-52 Stratofortress isn't just an aircraft, it's an omen. Born in the Cold War and still flying 70 years later, it's the plane that nations fear even when it's miles away. Stretching nearly half a football field long, with wings wider than a 747, it can carry 70,000 pounds of weapons, everything from laser-guided bombs to nuclear payloads. It doesn't sneak in, it dominates the sky, reminding everyone that America's reach isn't limited by borders. Each one is a flying fortress crewed by veterans trained for long-range precision strikes. When a B-52 appears near your coastline, it isn't reconnaissance, it's a signal. Its endurance is unmatched. These giants can fly from Louisiana to the Caribbean and back without stopping, refueled midair, circling for hours just beyond radar lines. For decades, the sight of that shadow has meant one thing: escalation. Venezuela knew it, the Pentagon knew it, and the world watching those radar maps knew it too. This wasn't about proximity. It was about pressure, written across the sky in contrails and intent. When the Pentagon addressed the sudden flights, the statement was simple: counter-narcotics operations. But no one believed that was the whole story. Washington claimed the bombers were patrolling international airspace to deter illegal trafficking routes, an explanation that sounded neat on paper, but hollow in reality. You don't send Cold War-era nuclear-capable bombers to chase smugglers. The deployment came just as relations between Washington and Caracas had hit a freezing point, sanctions tightening, oil disputes escalating, and whispers of Russian advisors reappearing in Venezuela's bases. Officially, the B-52s were supporting joint regional security, yet their flight paths told another story. They didn't patrol open ocean, they orbited close enough for Venezuelan radar to lock on. Each pass was a message disguised as a mission: we can be here anytime we want. It wasn't the drugs that worried Washington, it was deterrence wrapped in diplomacy and the kind of show of force that doesn't need words to be understood. In Caracas, the reaction was immediate and emotional. Within minutes of the B-52s appearing on radar, Venezuela's air defense network lit up like a warning flare. Commanders at Maiquetía and Barcelona bases were ordered to full readiness. The Venezuelan Air Force scrambled Su-30 fighters, their afterburners slicing through the humid night as they raced toward the Caribbean coast. State television interrupted broadcasts to condemn U.S. aggression, while officials claimed the bombers had violated their flight information region. In reality, the B-52s never crossed the line, but they didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough to send shockwaves through the military chain of command. President Nicolas Maduro appeared on camera, fist raised, accusing Washington of trying to provoke a confrontation under the mask of counter-drug patrols. Behind closed doors, however, intelligence officers were panicking. Every screen showed those slow, deliberate bomber loops, hour after hour. Caracas could do little more than watch and wait, because one wrong move could turn an aerial message into an international incident. The Caribbean sky had become a chessboard, one wrong move, and the game could end in disaster. Every time a Venezuelan jet climbed too close or a radar beam lingered too long, U.S. pilots watched carefully, fingers hovering near switches they hoped never to press. The B-52s carried no visible weapons, but that was part of the message. They didn't need to. Each aircraft could unleash devastation from hundreds of miles away. The risk wasn't attack, it was miscalculation. A misread radar lock, a jittery pilot, or a political order given too fast could ignite a storm no one could control. Military analysts warned that these kinds of signaling operations were the tightrope of modern deterrence, visible, deliberate, and dangerously easy to misinterpret. Yet Washington seemed willing to take that risk. It wasn't about immediate conflict, it was about showing capability. For Venezuela, though, every orbit felt like a countdown. The sky above wasn't just filled with contrails, it was filled with tension so thick it could be seen from space.